Hi, everybody. It is New Year's Eve day. Is that right? Anyway, it's the 31st of December here. If you are in another country and it is already New Year, Happy New Year, happy 2019. I'm taking this opportunity to do a bit of I did a recap my last video of 2018. I want to do some projections. I'm not going to call them predictions because nobody tracks whether anybody's right or wrong. But first, I added some light. It might be overlit now. Still working on it, but I think it's a little better than it being too dark. And I put my ROB in the background. You guys see that? I can finally display him. I'm so excited. I need like more shelves. And yeah, that's a Dragon's Lair deluxe pack. And then there's an Arbiter, and then you can't see it, but I've got like the original box. I'll tilt up the original box of Baldur's Gate from back in the day. I've got it all there. So I'm finally digging out some of my like OG gamer stuff. Whoop, went too far down. And I have my my Moogle plushie. Almost called him a Koopa. Oh boy. But yeah, I finally get to get some of that stuff out of storage and like my my Fallout guy bobblehead and stuff like that. So I'm very happy it's starting to come together. There's still a ton of junk in the background, and that's because a lot of that's like HDMI cables from the game consoles I haven't hooked up yet. It's been that crazy. But that's not what you want to watch. You want to watch my projections. You want to watch Zelda's Tale, apparently. Hello, Zelda. Oh, no, that was Scout. But you want my projections for 2019. One of the big things that is going to become a factor in 2019 is that video games are, the various companies, publishers, are probably going to take another crack at streaming games. And this fills me with consternation. The idea of streaming games on paper, like the way Silicon Valley engineers think about this stuff, it's great. You know, everything's just available and you can just get them whenever you want and there's no download, it just streams. But anytime it's streaming, you have to worry about lag and dropouts and throttling, and the infrastructures in various communities are just not there. And so what we'll get in a streaming game model is have and have not regions. I mean, maybe Australia will finally be able to enter the 21st century when it comes to technology, because that goofy version code thing they have to deal with down there. But if you're not on a decent internet connection, like if I was at my old house instead of my new house, I wouldn't be able to stream games properly. They'd either look like junk because they'd be on a really low resolution, or it would lag like crazy. And I mean, they're even struggling with, console, computer, like PC crossplay features in multiplayer because there's so much more lag on consoles. Hi, Linky. Oh, that's Momo, not Link. Hi, Momos. So yeah, while it's a great idea in theory, I think a much more viable model that actually does have some legs is the Xbox Game Pass model, where they have, some of their older games, the stuff that you may have missed or not been able to afford, and you can just download those for basically a subscription fee. If you're one of those people that likes to fart around and jump around with a lot of games, I'm not. I tend to want to complete something. A game has to really suck, like Wolpaw's Law suck, for me to not finish it. I need to finish. I'm just intense that way. But if you're somebody who likes to just bop around and sample games, Xbox Game Pass is a really good value for someone like me who does spend a lot of time on each game. Maybe not so much because I don't have the time to bop over to those older games unless it's my beloved text-based parser RPGs. Congratulations to my buddy Mouse Mary, just by the way, the guy I do the song parodies with. He is now a writer on adventure games, and if his published content is anywhere near as good as the stuff that we've talked about privately regarding, this old Quest for Glory and King's Quest style games, you guys are really going to love his content. So congratulations, man. Well earned, well overdue. The next thing, now that we've sort of covered streaming games and why I think Games Passes are a better alternative, I want to add a caveat to that. The problem with these Games Pass services is they are all getting divvied up from publisher to publisher. So it seems like a really great value until you realize that you have to buy, Origin to get their Games Pass, and then, your season pass on Destiny, and, Uplay, and then Xbox Game Pass, and whatever Sony is gonna attempt. There's got to be something. It gets really expensive really fast. And my concern about that model is if people are paying, $40-$50 a month to stream games, well, there's your games budget almost for a month. People aren't going to have the money left over to buy those AAA games, even used. Like used games even now are like $40. I bought Assassin's Creed Origins used, and it was $40. I mean, granted, it's more expensive in Canada than it is in the US. Our brand new AAA games are $80 up here. And I don't mind that. I don't mind games being a bit more expensive. I think games should be priced. My theory of whether a game is a good value is a movie ticket up here is about $12, 13 something with tax. You get 2 to 3 hours of entertainment for that. So my scale of whether something is good value is basically $4 to $6 an hour. So something like, the Witcher 3, that's like, I think I put 70 hours at least into that game. And it was $80 because I bought it. Oh no, I got that free with my video card. So that was a great investment. God of War, I put in about 45 hours on that, I think, for $80. So that's about, $2 an hour. That's pretty good value. And so I'm fine paying more for these games that are a bazillion hours. I think part of the reason they make games that are a bazillion hours because the art assets are the most expensive. So if they just want to throw, repetitive enemies at you for dozens of hours, it doesn't cost them that much more than, a 6 to 8 hour game like Hellblade. But you can get Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice on sale for under like $20. I think that's what I got it for. I think I got it for like $15 on a sale. But again, $15 for 6 to 8 hours of entertainment, that's good value as far as I'm concerned. We are going to have to start paying more for games at some point. I don't think there'll be a significant upfront price increase in 2019. But the reason I bring this up is because the alternative is these free to play or not very much to play with add-on cosmetic content like the dances in Fortnite. Well, Fortnite and games like it are facing some lawsuits that are going to really impact, depending on how they go, the revenue models for games of that type. If guys like, Alonzo, the guy who played Carlton on The Fresh Prince, Alonzo Rivera, is that his name? But he's suing because of the Carlton dance. A couple of other hip hop artists are suing because they've used dances that they coined or popularized without attribution, like without permission and without credit. And so this is going to really impact that sort of thing. I think it's kind of ingenious that Fortnite makes people pay for dances because that's sort of in-game identity. That's an extension of your avatar. And I mean, League of Legends showed that people will pay ridiculous amounts of money for skins. So Fortnite just took it one over. But if people determine that, if the courts determine that dance moves are actually intellectual property that people can own, that's going to really change Fortnite's revenue model in an interesting way. And if that goes against Epic Games, you are going to see them kind of, okay, this isn't a license to print money anymore. Where are we going to get money from? Well, the only place people are going to get money from is actually making games cost more. And as long as they're not huge leaps, I don't have a problem with paying fair prices for games, because a lot of people are just waiting for sales anyway if they're not like super duper stoked for games. And that's a segue into another thing I want to talk about. There are some games that have to come out already. And a lot of them are Sony exclusives. Things like Days Gone and The Last of Us 2, they cannot push anymore. Days Gone kind of disappeared. They're sort of referenced in the Sony commercials, but we haven't seen much. Is that Bend, the developer? But where's the game already? Last of Us 2 has been trailer after trailer after trailer. There's gameplay, don't freak out. But they haven't focused on showing off the gameplay in a way that makes it, the primary thing. They've been so focused on, whoa, Ellie's a lesbian, aren't we progressive? And I really don't think a AAA game can sell enough copies of a game that way. Something like Gone Home or Life is Strange can, because they have to sell a lot fewer to actually make their money back. But a place like, a Sony first-party Naughty Dog game, you got to give us the gameplay. And so they are running out of time before people start, you want to release a game when interest is peaked. And I'm afraid that people might be oversaturated on some of these titles that have been hyped and hyped and hyped, but no firm release date yet. I think something like Beyond Good and Evil 2, if I know Ubisoft, they're probably looking for a Christmas release or an early 2020 release with that. They just recently showed pre-alpha footage, so they've got some time. They actually showed that thing just playing. Anthem's gotta step it up too. I talked to a guy at a brunch today who is still sure that Anthem is going to give Destiny a run for its money. And I was like, no way, man. It is amazing to me how I used to be the biggest BioWare fangirl in the world. And I'm not anymore. I'm not excited. BioWare's last attempt at multiplayer with strong single player story components was The Old Republic, which stumbled badly out of the gate. It was not a bad game, like some people claim, and it was not a financial failure like some claim, but it really had a weak launch. And I think Anthem suffers from the same problem. That E3 adjacent stuff they showed this year was weak sauce. So they have to bring something pretty good and soon. Other games, and this brings me to my next point. Some studios have gotta, and I don't like to rush developers, but people like Blizzard, people like Bethesda, they have clear holes in their release schedule. And this makes me very concerned for the long-term viability of some of these studios. I think Bethesda will be fine because of Doom Immortal. But that, I keep confusing Bethesda and Blizzard because they both had really weak conferences in 2018. They are going to have to step up their game in 2019 because once consumer patterns change, you don't get them back. And the Diablo spell has been broken, the Fallout spell has been broken because they got greedy and went to these I don't know if Fallout 76 is mobile friendly, but it sure feels like it. Like it's that games as service thing. And once people start looking for something else, and the Assassin's Creed franchise is right back on the horse with Odyssey. Like the RPG elements kind of break the original design philosophy of Assassin's Creed in that, it was intended to minimize ludonarrative dissonance. But people are so desperate for games with RPG elements. I think that matters less than just a really fun player experience. And Odyssey delivered that in spades. It really did adapt to the way a player wants to play. I was a little bit bummed that stealth wasn't played up more. It is certainly an option, but you're not required to do it anywhere near as much. And so I felt like the experience was a little bit diluted, but the sheer fun of the combat and the exploration and the writing, it's very funny. And Cassandra, at least that's who I played as, is a really likable protagonist. So these companies like Bethesda, who sort of dominated Western RPGs by way of sandbox games that people who didn't know better thought were RPGs, they can't rest on their laurels the same way anymore. Then after that Fallout 76 thing, their next Elder Scrolls, their next actual Fallout game, Fallout 5 or the equivalent of New Vegas, they desperately need a game like New Vegas that is actually fun instead of just big. I know a lot of people liked Fallout 4. The Fallout games and Elder Scrolls games have become sandboxes that only give you what you put into it. There is nothing especially brilliant about those games. They're just simulators. They're, hatchet simulators, or shooty simulators, VAT simulators. And I think there's now so much competition because we're bound to see some kind of hint at something new from Horizon Zero Dawn, Cyberpunk, and whatever the next annual or semi-annual Assassin's Creed game. That RPG-ish space is becoming a lot more competitive, and places like Bethesda have got to watch it. Blizzard I'm less concerned about because Blizzard is just so lucky, but luck can run out. I mean, Overwatch was a big deal, but it wasn't a World of Warcraft level big deal. Fortnite kind of stole Overwatch's thunder. Like, Fortnite is definitely sort of that Grand Theft Auto World of Warcraft phenomenon now, as opposed to Overwatch. And that radically changes Blizzard's model because they can't be as slow releasing games anymore. So one of my projections for the year is, sadly, expect at least one beloved game studio to either go into bankruptcy, close its doors, or get acquired by some conglomerate, meaning it will not be the same again, or a combination of both. People are sort of whispering that they're afraid BioWare is going to be the one that joins the EA graveyard. There's vulnerabilities in a lot of companies right now. I think the only companies I would say are really safe are Bungie, Rockstar, and some of the Ubisoft studios. I wouldn't be surprised if they closed an Ubisoft studio, but because Ubi for now, I mean, they're constantly at risk of hostile takeover, but they seem to have dodged that bullet for now. That could flare up again, but I'm less... I see less danger signs for Ubi. They've come out of the worst of it, and they can control their publishing schedule because they are the publisher and the studio, the developer. But some of these others, you know, it stings to think about, but they are vulnerable. Everybody's vulnerable right now because games are just so damn expensive to make. I guess the next thing, the sort of final big thing that we kind of have to talk about in the year ahead is there going to be a new console announcement? I am really on the fence on this one. I think there very well might be, because Xbox, I think, wants to put the Xbox One behind them because it was kind of a giant number 2 for them. So they're motivated to put out a new console. Sony is then motivated to put out another console just so they don't give Xbox another 1 year head start. Now, I don't think they'll be out this year. I think we're looking 2020. I think they've already said that. And, I think it was Sony that said this will probably be the last console. Everything will become streaming after this. I don't buy that. They have been saying that about game consoles since the PlayStation 3. And it hasn't. Consoles are just too convenient. They're too affordable for people who don't want to get into the very expensive but oh so pretty world of PC gaming. So we are on the threshold of another Sony Microsoft head-to-head thing. And it's going to be interesting to see how the Switch influences that fight. Personally, I would leave the Switch alone if I were Microsoft and Sony. Give Nintendo that. Sony tried a similar thing with the PSP and the Vita, and it was just too expensive. Sony makes mid to high end devices. Leave Nintendo to the Switch. Nintendo does stuff like that well. Nintendo has always owned dedicated portable gaming devices. It is still an own the living room battle between Microsoft and Sony. And what I think would be smart for Microsoft to do is move over to basically, it's a gaming PC that you don't call a gaming PC. Call it a Cortana box, call it a Windows box, whatever. Or it's just an Xbox that gets away from that stupid partitioned software architecture that the Xbox One did. That system has to be so much more powerful to compete with a PlayStation because of its stupid software architecture. Just go straight up Windows. If Windows 10 is as gaming friendly as they claim it is, you can do a stripped down version of Windows 10 and it should run just fine. And then you basically are creating 2 platforms instead of 1 for people who want to develop for the Xbox, because it's the same version of the game from Windows to Xbox. It makes no sense for Microsoft to continue to have a different, source coding for Xbox games because they're doing that port feature. That would be smart. Microsoft doesn't tend to be smart. Microsoft tends to be confident. But I think they've been rattled in that regard. So I wouldn't be surprised to see something like that. But if Microsoft wants to be competitive or even win the next console cycle, it's got to be games. The whole teraflop marketing angle was a flop. Called that one. Nobody gives a shit about teraflops. You need something with a face. I shouldn't say that. People like me and my buddy Rich at Review Tech USA, we care about specs, but we are the minority. The big issue that I think consoles got into, the quagmire that they got into with this generation, with the Pro and the Xbox One X or whatever is they backed the wrong technological innovation. 4K doesn't have the install base to really bother with, but frame rate you can do. And, PlayStation VR was already pushing a 120 rate. That matters. Even HDR color, which yes is bundled into 4K, but even HDR color is a more meaningful, improved experience for a lot of people than 4K. People think they care about 4K. Most people cannot see the difference because their TV isn't big enough and they're viewing their TV from an incorrect viewing distance. So all it does is give them eye strain. It doesn't give them a better experience. They think it gives them a better experience, like drinking wine out of an expensive glass versus a cheap glass, but it really doesn't taste any different. So if the consoles now focus on frame rate, instead, like really, really great frame rates, this is going to be a battle. If they continue to just go better graphics, nobody cares. The biggest thing, and Sony is right now skunking Xbox, like just dunk, 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 dunk. It's in that first party game franchise corner. And Xbox is really going to have to pull out something special to get close. Because if you think of all the franchises, even with Last of Us getting kind of pukey and nobody's quite sure what's going on with Uncharted, you've got some really interesting IPs coming down the pipe, including that samurai Ghosts of Setsuya or something like that. I forget the name of it, but that really cool one, like that's coming down the pipe. And they've got Horizon Zero Dawn. They've got some God of War, more viable than ever. Everybody freaked out about that game after dumping on it for its entire development period. Sony has some really beloved IPs, and so does Nintendo. I mean, Smash continues to be dominant. Smash is not going away. Mario's not going away. Zelda's not going away. For all the doom and gloom that people portended from Nintendo, Nintendo is just fine, and Nintendo is going to be fine because Nintendo understands IP and protecting their IPs. And it's good to see Nintendo branching out and doing some of those partnerships with their IPs. I think that's really healthy. But Nintendo understands IP. And that's why Nintendo will continue to sell consoles even if they don't have top-of-the-line hardware capabilities. Microsoft has to recognize that with its Xbox brand and stop trying to piggyback on things like esports and stop being a service-driven marketing thing. You gotta get IPs that people fall in love with. And Sony has been able to create enough games, and they're the go-to, and this could change in a heartbeat. So this is not something they should rest on, but they've got, they get the Destiny trailers, they get the Call of Duty trailers. They're not only the preferred console this cycle for the big third parties, but they've also got a lot of really great first party stuff. And that is the way you sell consoles. And no matter how many times they say consoles are dead, consoles are dead, consoles are dying, you give people a great experience and you give people great community, and they will continue to buy consoles, even if, as consoles tend to be, they are only borrowing on kind of low hardware specs. People don't care as much about that stuff as the industry thinks they do. You need to provide them great experiences. I mean, look at Minecraft. Minecraft looked like shit. Nobody cared. It was fun. Fortnite doesn't even look that great. It's colorful, as was World of Warcraft. Color does bring people in. Resolution, not so much. So I think, to close off, what 2019 desperately needs, and it doesn't matter who it comes from, as long as it comes from somewhere, it will be good for the industry as a whole. It needs what 2018 profoundly lacked, which was a real sense of excitement and innovation. There were a lot of very, very good games. All the ones I was looking forward to didn't suck. God of War, Spider-Man, Assassin's Creed, and there's one I'm forgetting and I feel terrible about it because I had a blast at it and the name's not coming to mind. Breath of the Wild was last year, but the Switch was great in general. But there wasn't anything super exciting. Like, this was the first holiday in a really long time that didn't feel like overwhelmed with hype. And I think that's good for a break, but we need to bring the hype back. Something needs to capture the imagination. If one thing does it, I think this holiday it was Red Dead 2 and Smash. But if one thing really becomes the crest of the wave, that is good for the whole industry. And Fortnite. Obviously, Fortnite was the big cultural phenomenon. Those cultural phenomenons are extremely important to the overall health of the gaming industry. And what drives me crazy about the games press is that they grumble about Fortnite. Whoop, my Tuftspan fell off. Time to wrap it up, latest saying. But people are grumbling about Fortnite and trying to create all these things why Fortnite is bad for your kids. But something like Fortnite, a phenomenon that crosses over into mainstream awareness, that is incredibly important for the health of the industry going forward, because this brings in new players who buy stuff. And every industry needs new consumers to overcome the natural entropy that no matter how good the product is, some people just phase out. They don't have time, they don't have the money, whatever. You need that refresh. And things like Fortnite, things like Grand Theft Auto, things like Red Dead Redemption, things like Halo, Call of Duty, Minecraft, those big games, those cultural phenomenons, they are essential to gaming's considered continued health. So that is my forecast for 2019. People have been kind of cranky lately, so I'm sure people will yell at me all the time, but I do appreciate just your ideas. Like, don't yell at me about my ideas, offer yours. And if you like what you saw, if you thought this was worthy, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K. If you are still mad at Patreon, there is a link to a PayPal donation address in the description box below. So if you want to use PayPal because you don't want to use Patreon, that is an option. I'm not sure if I want to touch on the Patreon controversy anymore, but there was a sort of interesting article in the New York Times that I'm still chewing on. I don't know. I might do that in the new year. One of the things I'm definitely going to do in the new year is a short series of videos on sort of the history and principles of free speech. Because one of the things I think has contributed to the Patreon debacle, the Subscribestar debacle, some of the things that have been going on with social media, YouTube, Facebook, all that stuff, is that there are competing understandings of free and equal speech that actually are in conflict with each other. And so everybody intends to argue from a free speech perspective. Not everybody, that's a generalization, but a lot of people really, truly are arguing from a free speech perspective, but it's not the same concept of free speech. And I think that's worth exploring. I'm going to do that in the month of January just to get my palette. I have started my video game bootcamp videos. I've written the first script. Ladybit stuff is going to go out in the new year too. Once we still have a postal backlog in Canada. And then of course that's gearing up for Boss Fight in the spring. I gotta get my my engine back. I gotta get my my writing, my concept stuff back after this absolutely hellish move. So thanks for watching. No content tomorrow because it's New Year's Day. Everybody's gonna be like hungover or too tired or still partying the night before, so there's no point. I will resume again on Wednesday with new content. And thanks for watching.